Isn't it great when friends send you through 4K discs to take a look at? This is the case with the Hobbit trilogy, and it wasn't a series I was intending to take a look at anytime soon, but Mark sent me this through and it's rather surprised me. I don't suppose there are many people out there who need to be told that all three of the Hobbit films were directed by Peter Jackson, the first of which, in 2012, was The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. This was a runaway success. It had an estimated budget of $180 million and it grossed at the worldwide box office just over $1 billion. It has a running time of 2 hours and 49 minutes, an aspect ratio of approximately 2.40 to 1, and comes with Dolby Atmos sound. All three of the films were shot entirely on digital video at a rate of 5K. They were shot for 3D, but what made it to cinemas was just a reduction to 2K. So whatever you saw, even if it was one of the 35mm blow-ups, or indeed the 1570 flat print or the dual prints, the 2-strip IMAX prints which made for the 3D, they were all presumably taken from that 2K digital video master. I can't be sure of that, but that's my interpretation. So the image quality wouldn't have been exactly what you would expect from an IMAX cinema, but they did have a taller aspect ratio. So when these were shot, all three of them, they were not only shot with the guidelines for 2.35, 2.40 to 1, but also for 2.00 to 1. So that's why you got taller aspect ratios in cinemas with the IMAX label. Genuine IMAX houses who still have the 1570 equipment and the 1.43 to 1 screens, you would have had blank areas at the top and bottom of the screen. But in the faux IMAX houses, such as the Remains of the Empire Leicester Square, I think that's got a 1.90 to 1 screen in it. Don't think it's possible to fit a 1.43 to 1 in that old stalls area. Rear of the stalls, it's not tall enough. So you would have pretty much had a filled screen in those, and that one is 90 feet wide, so would have been hugely impressive, but perhaps not quite the image quality you would expect of something with the IMAX label, given that it's only come from 5K. However, that does mean you get what I call the VistaVision effect, because 5K is getting on for 35mm anamorphic capability, so that would reduce down into whatever you were looking at. So the image quality would not be entirely lost at 2K or whatever it was blown up to, such as 35mm or 1570 IMAX. But the 48 frames per second that definitely is listed for the second and third films in the series, then that would possibly be 24 frames per second for each eye. So it sort of makes sense. So leave a comment if you know better than I on that one to explain what that 48 frames per second was. But in here, 24 frames per second, flat, 2.40 to 1, 2.35 to 1. They did look very good. In places they were very sharp, and actually overly sharp, looked almost artificial at times. And even some conventional scenes, the sets are brilliant, there's no doubt about that, and the way it's all put together, you've got to admire it. But even conventional scenes, sometimes the characters looked almost fake, and it was just genuinely shot video. So real people walking along, real landscapes, and I was thinking that doesn't look right. So perhaps there are optical effects in there also, and they've morphed all this together, they've composited it all together, and sometimes something's been lost. But we're talking about a fantasy world here. Does it really matter? And you look at the box office of the sequels, and I don't think it does, because even though these films weren't entirely for me, bear in mind, I'm watching this as a slightly older person, and these are aimed, certainly the book I read, it was aimed at children. So these are largely aimed at youngsters, and if you love the Lord of the Rings series, as I know a lot of people did, then I think you're going to get something out of seeing the Middle-earth all over again. And in fact, if you did love the Lord of the Rings, you've probably seen these already and made up your own mind. So I'm only giving you my interpretation here, and my interpretation was that the first film was way too slow. I felt at the end of it that I'd seen something that could have run 45 minutes to an hour, and that seemed to correspond all the way through this series. I think at the end of it I felt that if Peter Jackson had made 2 films that ran about 2 hours long each, I think it would have appealed to me much more. But there is a big fan market out there, and there is a market for these longer, more drawn out stories in these fantasy worlds. Certainly the case with The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Now, my history of The Lord of the Rings went to the Odeon Leicester Square to see that. I think it might have actually been opening night, and I sat there waiting for it to start and to start. The film's running. I enjoyed the first half hour or so, but I thought, please get going, please get going. I had the same feeling with this first part, The Hobbit, and by the end of the film I felt The Lord of the Rings, I felt it didn't ever get going. I think The Hobbit does get going, but it seemed to me to take an awful long time to get there. And then you put yourself back into 2012 and it was released. You had another year to wait until the next one came out, and then another year. It wasn't like Star Wars originally, where you had 3 years to wait, and The Empire Strikes Back just didn't have an ending, not a satisfactory ending. You thought, oh no, now we've got to wait 3 years to find out what happened. And that was a big criticism of that at the time. Don't think you could label that at these with them being turned out so quickly. But for me, they were too slow. I would have enjoyed them as shorter films, but there are extended versions of each one in here. Each one comes with the theatrical disc and the extended version. This one on the first part I think is about 15 minutes longer and 20 minutes longer on the other two, something like that, 15-20 minutes. I don't think there's any way I'd ever want to watch the extended versions. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who prefer to watch the extended versions because they love everything about these Middle-earth films, and I can appreciate that. So only my opinion of them and other opinions are available. Now, I mentioned the box office of each of the 2 sequels. Part 2 is The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. This one has a running time of 2 hours and 41 minutes, for the theatrical version anyway. This had an estimated budget of $225 million and grossed at the worldwide box office $959 million. The third film, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, this has a running time of 2 hours and 24 minutes. It had an estimated budget of $250 million and grossed at the worldwide box office $962 million. So, irrespective of any reservations I might have, these were massive money earners for Warner Brothers, MGM, and probably an ongoing success to this day on home video streaming and everything else. We need more blockbusters like this to come along to actually keep everything going in the way to which we've come to know. According to IMDb, the third film didn't get the IMAX 1570 blow-up treatment. That was the only one of the 3 that didn't, but that assumes that IMDb is fully correct, which it sometimes isn't. There are no special features in this pack, just the films in both forms on each of the 6 4K discs. Of them all, I enjoyed the second film the most, and I think this is because, having got through the first film and not really following it too well, the myriad characters all a bit much, all a bit bamboozling, and got to the second film and I picked up on a few of the characters through that, and I think that was why I enjoyed it some more. It might be the better film, but I thought that was the better film, possibly the first one, the second best, and then the third one the least best, if that's the right way to put it. But now that I know all the characters, I know the stories, I know how drawn out they are, if I ever watch them again, my opinion of which is the best and how much I enjoy them may change. The picture quality is filmic without the film grain aspect of it. At least that was my perception of it. I enjoyed the way they looked. They looked a bit fake at times, as I mentioned, but overall very good image quality, particularly when you consider that VistaVision effect from the 2K up to the 4K. But as usual, I expect it's the HDR that gives it that filmic looking feel. But I thought the sound was the best aspect of this pack, and of the 3 films, I felt that the third film was the most impressive. However, it could just be that I had the volume slightly higher when I watched that one and therefore had a more enveloping effect. But I would imagine these sound good on anything, and particularly anyone with a Dolby Atmos system. I think you're going to love the way these sound. So, as much as it wouldn't really be for me ordinarily, these films, I have enjoyed taking a look at them. It's given me the inspiration to do this review. I think for older people who are watching them, they may not get as much out of it as someone in their 20s or younger, but I think there's something in there for anyone who appreciates the movies. They're so spectacular, you can't help but like them. I think that's similar with some of the Star Wars film, the amount of work that goes into them. Don't think they're perfect. I would expect that I would enjoy the Lord of the Rings trilogy more. I've only ever seen the first film, but I did like the look of the second and third when the trailers came out, so much so that I bought those trailers on Scope Super 8, and they do look and sound fantastic. So something to maybe look out for the future when I finally take a look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy 4K release. And I think The Hobbit is just about to get steelbook release, its special steelbook pack release, so maybe that's something for people to look out for. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'm encouraged to keep going with content like this. Until the next video, bye bye for now.